understood what the stakes were. They just maybe need somebody to motivate them, somebody to get them to understand it. There's so much bad, advice going on in Washington. There's so many special interests. They're not getting the truth from any of their advisors. I don't necessarily think a lot of the people in Washington are evil or bad. If they actually understood what was going on, they might do the right thing. And I think I've got an ability to communicate that and to explain a lot of these concepts in ways that they'll understand them. And I certainly have a history. I mean, I go back for 10 years, a documented history of things that I've written, of radio and television interviews that I've done, and you can see one thing after another where I've said something and then it's happened. I've said something that's happened. And so they're going to have to understand that I know what I'm talking about. And if they keep doing what they're doing now, I'm going to tell them exactly how it's going to end. And maybe they're not going to like that. Maybe they'll be willing to do something about it. And maybe just my election will cause some people to be able to change. I mean, hell, if Peter Schiff can get elected, telling the truth, maybe it'll work for me. And, I don't even know if anyone's ever been elected, telling the public the truth. And so maybe if it works, and I think a lot of people will be nervous. A lot of incumbents, if they see me win, they might feel that their job is in jeopardy. Because if Peter Schiff can step out of, a private citizen and can run for office and win, there are plenty of other private citizens that might step up and run for office and replace more of these career politicians. Because if we keep sending the same guys back to Washington, well, how is anything going to change? As far as they're concerned, as long as they got reelected, they're doing a good job. It doesn't matter what happens to the country. But I think that'll be different with me there, and that's what I'm going to do. As I said, I'm not going to go to the Senate and then try to make friends with the senators so I can get a good assignment, so I can have their help when it's time to to raise money for my reelection or get on a good committee. I'm just going to spend 100% of my time trying to solve these problems. I mean, and sometimes a senator can be very powerful. If I can just help filibuster and block the increase in the debt ceiling, if I can just prevent the government from raising the debt ceiling, then they're going to have to cut spending. They won't have any choice. That's all I have to do is just not let them raise it. They just raised it by $2 trillion a couple of days ago. But I know the sad thing is it's going to run out in a year. That's how much money we're borrowing. So maybe I can stop the next increase in the national debt from happening and force them to act responsibly. Any other questions?
Peter, one thing. I mean, as you go across the state, do you see the sentiment growing against all the incumbents like this what happened in Massachusetts? Is everybody angry all around and all their legislators and their senators?
Well, I think that...
And do you think they're going to be in trouble next year?
Well, I think, hopefully. I mean, incumbents have the deck is really stacked in their favor. So it's hard to get rid of these guys. But I think, as the economy worsens, and it's going to worsen, more and more people are going to lose their jobs, and the people that have their jobs, their paychecks are not going to go as far. I know that this is just getting started. People think the recession is over. It's not over. It's a depression that's just beginning. And it's not going to be a depression like our grandparents lived through, where the cost of living goes down. It's going to be an inflationary depression, where the cost of living goes way up, and that's much more painful for average Americans. And so as it gets worse, I think more people are going to start to blame, the powers that be, and it's going to be easier to defeat these guys. But it's certainly, it's difficult right now because they have the deck stacked in their favor, which is, part of the problem. You've got people, Chris Dodd, whose seat that I'm trying to take, he's been in the Senate for over 30 years. And before that he was in the House. He never worked in the private sector. How can we have people writing regulations that they never even have to subject themselves to? But we have all these people in Congress trying to figure out how to create jobs, and the reason is because none of them has ever done it. They have no idea where jobs come from. Where businesses come. They think they just spring out of thin air. So, you can't have a culture. It's almost like Washington is like, they're like royalty. They're living separate from us. We don't want that. We don't want that culture in this country. We should have citizen legislatures. That's what our founding fathers envisioned. The reason that the House is up every 2 years is because they figured people would serve for 2 years and leave. They didn't think they would stay there that long. The senators were there for 6 years. That was their term. They were appointed by the state legislatures. But the body that was supposed to be responsive to the electorate was the House, and they figured it was going to be high turnover. Why make them run every 2 years if it's the same guys? The whole idea was they would be different guys. that people would interrupt their careers, go to Washington, stay there for a couple of years, and then leave and let somebody else come in. But now they get in there, and that's their whole life, is staying in Washington. And they have this permanent bureaucratic culture. And they're there for themselves. I mean, they claim that they're there for public service, but they're there to serve their own interests. That's it. And so we need to get the turnover. And that's why, people talk about term limits. I don't even want the first term. I wish I didn't have to run. But unfortunately, I do. Because no one else is stepping up to the plate who I have any confidence is going to do what needs to be done. And I think there are more private citizens that can go into government and solve these problems. Because again, the career politicians, they're incapable of solving them because their problem is getting reelected. So they do what's politically expedient, not what makes sense economically. And often what makes sense economically is not popular. As parents, I mean, we don't, if you just want to be popular with your kid, then you spoil them. You let them eat cake and ice cream for dinner, but is that really in his best interest, or do you want to have him eat something nutritious? The politicians don't appeal to us on that level. They just want to give us what we want, even though it's bad for us because it makes it easier for them to get reelected. That psychology has to change before it's too late.
How do you say the incumbents have the deck stacked on their side, or
Well, once you're an incumbent, as far as it's very difficult for your competitor to overcome the power of the incumbency. Certainly, when it comes to ballot access, or it comes to special interests and money raising. And of course, once they get in there and they gerrymander these districts, and they carve the districts out in these ways, so that if you're in there, they figure out exactly how they can carve up your district to make sure you stay in there. And in many cases, they don't even care, if it's Republican or Democrat, as long as it's one of those two and they stay there, that's all they care about. Because they pretend a lot of times when they're arguing that there's a lot of difference between them. But in many cases, there's not much difference. There's some difference in the rhetoric. But in practicality, there's very little difference. Just look at what they do. Look at how under Democrat or Republican rule, government keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They keep passing more and more government programs. Nobody ever shrinks them. No departments get eliminated. No laws get repealed. It grows no matter who's in charge. And now the whole economy is collapsing beneath the weight of all this government. It has to change. Okay, I guess we're out of questions. Thank you. Schiff.com. You got the flyers there on the campaign. The headquarters are up in Milford. And anybody wants to volunteer and help out or tell your friends about my candidacy, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. That was really appreciative and uplifting. And it's definitely a breath of fresh air from what sat in that seat for the last 30 years. So good luck to you, and I hope things work out. Really good.